name is Thomas Huddleston, and I coordinated the previous international campaign in 2018 to get out the vote in the local elections. I'm also a migration, political participation researcher. This is what I study. This is also what I do. And so I'm really excited to give you what I'm considering a masterclass on how Brussels can become the most cosmopolitan democracy in the world. So after this, you'll be able to make that happen together. Now, I hope that you will be able to listen and absorb a lot. You're going to be able to get these slides afterwards because you're going to get a lot of information from here. I'm going to really print it also as a PDF, as a playbook that all of us can use. But this training is also going to go out as a video for anyone who wants to follow on and join us in building out this campaign to reach 1/3 of the city. So how's this going to work? Well, I want to share a lot of the lessons learned from the last local elections campaign called Vote Brussels, and you can read the full evaluation there. And you might say, why do I need to listen to a discussion for 40 minutes? All I need to do is just sign up. Well, if any of you are not signed up to vote already and you want something else to do while I'm speaking, it'd be great to see if anyone goes and tries to sign up online. The link is in here and in the chat. But in order to connect with 1/3 of the city, we can't just go around and give them a bunch of technical information. So what I want you to get from this training is, if we want Brussels to really be the most democratic, cosmopolitan city in the world, why is that? How are we going to make this happen? And then finally, what can you do about it? Okay, so why? Why does Brussels have so much potential as a cosmopolitan democracy? So some of you might know this, but Brussels is the most diverse city in the democratic world. Dubai is more diverse, but it is not a democracy. And that means that any of you who are a non-Belgian citizen, you have actually become now 1/3 of all potential voters in the Brussels region. You can see here that actually the majority of potential voters in the Brussels region are either non-Belgian citizens or they were naturalized, they were born abroad, but have become Belgian citizens. And their numbers continue to grow over time. So the difference is that a lot of the naturalized Belgian citizens were born somewhere outside the EU, like myself. I'm originally American. Whereas a lot of the non-Belgian citizens are mostly European citizens coming from other EU countries and don't plan on taking up Belgian citizenship. And this makes Brussels democracy really unique, not just in the world, but also in Belgium. So as you can see here, over half of the electorate are either non-Belgian citizens or are naturalized. And actually 37% of the population are non-Belgian citizens. And that's very different from the general situation in Flanders or Wallonia or really any other city in Belgium. So Brussels, if it is going to be a democracy, has to engage in this 1/3 of the city. And now the second thing I want you to understand about why it's important for us to be a cosmopolitan democracy is I need to correct how we often talk about political power in Belgium. You hear Belgium is complicated, the federal government does this and that, and it should or it shouldn't. It creates the perception that power in Belgium is primarily at the federal level. And then we've got all of the other layers of the lasagna, the communities, the regions that have a lot of power. And then, you might forget about the 581 communes that make up Belgium. So this is how politicians talk about power in Belgium. This is how the media talks about it. Whereas I would argue this is actually how political power really works in Belgium. The federal government coordinates, and it has, of course, key roles on the international level. The communities and the regions have also been able to take up more and more power, but the communes are actually the basis of power in Belgium. and they influence each other. What happens at the communal level actually shapes what is then done by the regions, the communities, and the federal. And for the federal, the communities, and the regions to do what they want to do, they need the communes to take this up. And so I'm going to give you a little example. You don't have to answer this out loud. But if I were to ask you who are Belgium's most powerful, most popular politicians on the Dutch-speaking side and on the French-speaking side, you'd probably respond these two people, Bart de Wever and Paul Magnette. But then what if I were to ask you, where have they chosen to hold office? Yes, they're the heads of their party, but what's their jobs? The answer, one is the mayor of Antwerp and the other is the mayor of Charleroi. And you regularly get stories that appear in the Belgian media like this. Bart Somers from the Open Veil Day resigns as Flemish minister to become mayor of Mechelen again. And he says, I choose what is really important. So these are just indicators of why the local level has so much power in a country like Belgium. In fact, we as residents have more power at the local level in Belgium than anywhere else in the EU. So the commune has control of the city hall services. They decide what kind of treatment you receive, what kind of experience you have when you're going to the population office, when you're going to the foreigner's office, when you're requesting different types of civil documents. They are the main investor and main spender of money in Belgium on cultural, social, and sports facilities. They are also the main coordinator and investor in your commune's daycare and their school infrastructure. They also have large portfolios to support the local economy, to support local housing, to build social housing. They have the say over most of the parking policy, most of the traffic policy, and the general mobility approach in your area. The mayor is actually in charge of the police. They coordinate the police through also police zones, sometimes with other communes, but they are the ones who are primarily responsible for policing and for public security. They also are the ones primarily responsible and coordinating, investing in public works, in many green spaces, and generally in the public space in their area. They also are in charge of coordinating the trash bins that are on your street and the street cleaning on most streets. And they approve a lot of the urban planning and also environmental permits. And lastly, you might not know this, but the communes are also in charge of the welfare offices in Belgium, the CPAS. Those belong to the communes. And communes can decide to develop all different types of services for vulnerable groups, for youth, for elderly, for the unemployed, for refugees, for unaccompanied minors. They can offer a lot of services. So we all have more power at the local level in Belgium than anywhere else, because in the end, your commune should be treating you with respect, and they should be able to show how they're improving your daily life, how they're investing in your neighborhood, and how they're defending your interests with the regional and national authorities. So in the chat, if you want to share, I'm really interested, what of these powers that you have at the local level are most important for you? What would you like to see changed or improved in your commune over the next 6 years? So just take a moment, think about your life, the life of your family, your neighbors, your friends, things that you like in your commune that you'd like to see more of, things that haven't changed in the way you'd like. Just take a moment to share. I don't know, Tom, if you also like to share for yourself in Scarbeck.
Yeah, for sure. So I'm right on the border of Scarbeck and Aver, actually. I have a foot in both, but I am officially in Scarbeck. And it's a bit of a tension point here, but I'm one of my bugbears is mobility, and I care very much about it. And it's interesting because so much of the kind of overhaul of mobility in Scarbeck has been stalled very much because there has been division in the commune. So it's something that I'm hoping to see change. Um, alongside that, there are also things I would really like to see in terms of public space and parks. I have a little boy, and he's soon going to be up and about and walking. And we actually have some quite nice parks in on the like, because right over in Aver I is where I walk when I want to go and take the little guy out for a walk. But I would like to see more public spaces, green public spaces down my end of Scarbeck. So that's what's on my mind.
Great. Thanks for sharing, Tom. And we'll have a look at what some of you have raised later on. But it's really important to share the power that ordinary residents have here in Belgium and the kinds of changes they can make, because people know their neighborhoods and they know what they want to change. So luckily, every 6 years, we get a chance to have a say in order to elect the city councillors that make up the city council of our commune. Based on how those elections turn out, then a majority will be formed, and they decide who will be the alderman and who will be the mayor, and they form the city college. So that's how it works in Brussels. Now, our local authorities can do a lot, and we have a lot of choice about which politicians we want to hold those positions. You have many more political choices in Belgium than in most countries. Here you see a map of the 19 communes with the current mayor of the commune highlighted in their party's color, and then you see who are their coalition partners, for example, who are represented in the aldermen. And when you're voting, you're going to have a lot of choices. You can vote for national parties. Sometimes the Dutch and the French-speaking parties will have separate lists. Sometimes they'll have joint lists. Sometimes you'll have multi-party lists. And you'll also see that there are often local parties that will emerge that are not affiliated with any of the national parties, but are just groups of citizens in your area that like to have a say. And sometimes they do get a seat in the local council. And when you're voting, you can either vote for the whole party list, which basically says, I'm happy with, this party, and if the most votes go to this party, I know who's going to get the first seat, the second seat, I know who's going to get elected. Or you can vote for specific candidates on that list, and that basically rearranges the party list. So let's say the person at the bottom of the list gets all of the votes. Well, actually, they're kind of bumped up then to the top of the list, and they're going to be guaranteed a seat. So you have a power not just to choose the party that you want, but also the specific candidates that you would like to see representing you. So we can and create cosmopolitan democracy, but how are we going to make this system work? Well, luckily, welcome to Belgium, the land of voting. I show you here the top 10 countries worldwide that have the highest turnout in elections, and you see that Belgium is up there in the top 10. So people vote. This is one of the main ways that people make change in this country. And voting is also your fundamental right. Being here in the European Union, our rights are protected by the European Charter of Fundamental Rights that in its Article 40 says for EU citizens, they have the right to vote and to stand as a candidate in municipal elections. And Belgium has extended this also to non-EU citizens who've been here for 5 years. So it's your fundamental right. However, this is the problem. The democratic world's most cosmopolitan city is headed for a democratic deficit. So in the 2018 elections, here was the actual voter turnout. So you saw that in general in Belgium, about 90% of people vote in 90% of voters vote in their elections. Well, in the last local elections, as you can see, in some places, you barely had half of people voting. In Brussels, in the largest you could see is about 2/3 of people voting. And it seems like if nothing's done this time, it's going to get worse. And we might end up in a city where perhaps even the majority of the population is not being heard or represented. So why is that? Well, that happens because in the Belgian system, the number of seats in a municipality are based on its population. But of course, the number of votes that you need in order to get that seat is based on the size of the electorate. So I give you here the 19 communes, and you can see in 2018 how many city councillors and aldermen they had based on the total population. But given how diverse Brussels is, with a third of the population being international voters, you can see that Belgian voters only make up around 2/3 of the electorate. So I just ran a little exercise. Let's look at Excel, for example. How many votes would you need in Excel in order to get a seat if internationals didn't vote? So internationals in Excel make up nearly almost half of the population. So let's imagine they didn't vote and the electorate was only consisting of Belgian voters. Well, there are 43 seats, and I took, here we'll come back to this, but I took the current projections of the elections across Brussels. So that's why these parties get the scores that they do. And you see that in a large commune like Excel, actually people are getting elected with less than 1,000 votes. And in most of the Brussels communes, which are much smaller than Excel, people can be elected as city councillor with just a few hundred votes. So why is that? Well, the problem is, as you can see here, only around 17 to 19% of internationals in Brussels were registered to vote in 2018. Now, during our 5-month campaign last year, we were able to double that. When we started the campaign, only 8% were registered, and we were able to increase that overall. That meant 25,000 new voters who did actually have an impact on the elections. But why is this number so low? Well, the unique situation of Brussels is a challenge for Belgian democracy. And we'll get to this later, but one of the points is that Belgian citizens have not been required to register as voters since 1893. So voter registration is not part of the political culture. It should say, sorry, earliest registration deadline in the EU. So one of our challenges is that people, internationals have to sign up to vote 90 days before the local elections, which is one of the earliest registration deadlines in the EU. So internationals have to actually sign up really before the local campaigns begin. They have to kind of be better citizens than the citizens to know about elections and know what the stakes are. Currently, there's really little government or NGO contact with a lot of the internationals that make up Brussels, who are workers or who are students, especially mobile EU citizens. They're not using a lot of government services. They're not in contact with many local NGOs and vice versa. And that's partly because of what it's like to be an international in Brussels. There's a lot of high mobility here. People come and go. We have a lot of newcomers. And that also puts a lot of administrative burden on communes when they're registering people just to reside. So then asking them to vote would be another step that doesn't happen. Also, the local authorities have a huge administrative burden running the elections because, as you saw, 90% of people vote. So in those months before the election, the communes are really busy just setting up for the elections. They don't have a lot of time and personnel to actually register 1/3 of the city. And that problem's compounded by the fact that there's really no clear government responsibility for voter registration in Belgium. And there are very limited funds. From what I've seen, basically, we're going to get about 1% of the funds that we would need in order to register 1/3 of the voters in Brussels. And as we're going to learn, there's unfortunately still some residual xenophobia in Belgium about the idea of increasing the electorate. And in a similar, although parallel way, the idea of increasing the electorate is also very politicized. It's something that parties are always thinking about whether or not it benefits them, rather than thinking about whether or not it benefits their commune or benefits citizens. In particular, if you are an incumbent in this system, you're often very happy with your voters, right? As we saw earlier, you've got your 1,000 voters. You just need to make sure that they're voting for your party and for you. And the Brussels democratic deficit actually makes it easier to get elected in Brussels than in other parts of the country because you need fewer votes to get the many more seats. Instead, parties shift a lot of the responsibility for this work to individual diverse candidates who on their own have to get their votes. And so as a result of all these challenges, there's so much misinformation that circulates, there's so many myths about voting in Belgium, and there's hardly any multilingual materials. So what does this mean for your normal international voter? The Brussels Commissioner's Office in 2012 did an excellent large-scale survey of EU citizens that we replicated in 2018 and found very similar results when we asked international voters why they didn't vote in the local elections. So you can see the breakdown of issues here. So half of them said, voting is compulsory in Belgium and that frightens me. When we did focus groups, we heard things like, I hear that I'm going to be fined and I can't afford that for my family. I'm worried that my neighbor is going to denounce me because they'll hear that I didn't vote. I'm worrying that I'm traveling and I want to respect the rules, but I don't know what to do. I'm worried that in my commune, they're not particularly nice to my nationality and they're going to come after me in particular. So in addition, we heard from people that the process felt too complicated because when you told people about voter registration, they thought a lot about how hard it was sometimes to register as a resident. The appointments, the policemen coming by, the documents that you have to provide, the name issues, that people assume that it's going to be just as hard to sign up to vote. And then, you see some other issues popping up, like the fact that Belgium has one of the earliest voter registration deadlines, people not knowing what to do on election day if they're not going to be here, not feeling like they get enough information in their language. But what I also want you to take out of this is only 20% said they weren't interested. So the fact that Belgium has such a low voter registration rate among internationals, it's not because they're not interested. It's because of this misinformation and lack of engagement. So how are we going to fight this? I've got 4 tips for us. The first is we need to know our history. We need to know about all of the Belgians and the non-Belgians who fought for us to have these rights. So I'm just giving you a little overview here of when Belgium was the first to do something in Europe or the last to do something in Europe, because it tells something. So Belgium was one of the first countries to have a liberal constitution in 1830. In fact, you had a lot of non-Belgian revolutionaries who, had been working with Napoleon and fighting in these wars and decided to stay in Belgium. Well, they got caught up in the Belgian Revolution, and actually they joined the first National Congress that created the 1830 Constitution. But under that constitution, only the top 1% of citizens were allowed to vote. Then 1893, Belgium becomes the first country to introduce obligatory voting. 21 countries still have it. And it was also the first country in 1899 to create proportional representation. So what this did is Belgium created universal male suffrage, and this was meant to end voter intimidation. Ordinary people were being stopped from going to the polls by their employers who had forced them to work, or they were being intimidated by thugs who were stopping them from getting to the polls. So obligatory voting guaranteed that everyone had a right to go to the polls. They didn't have to vote if they didn't want to, but no one could stop them from going there. And proportional representation allowed for more parties to be represented. Still, people had to fight another 30 years and fight through World War I for the working class male voter equality in 1919, and for the start of building the welfare state in Belgium that has created one of the most, equitable, wealthy countries on the planet. So Belgium created a very inclusive system with obligatory voting and proportional representation. It was the first on many of those things, but in some way, that made it one of the last to expand the electorate because parties became very attached to their voters and worried about what it would mean to expand the electorate. So Belgium was one of the last countries in Europe to give the right to vote to women. They had to fight for 40 years and fight through 2 world wars to start work on gender equality. It was one of the last colonial powers to give any voting rights to its colonies. First, just local voting rights, but that mobilization also then led to independence. It was also one of the last countries to grant naturalized citizens full voting rights. Ordinary immigrants and families could only vote in local elections until 1976, after 150 years. It was one of the last countries to give young people aged 18 to 21 voting rights and just start this work on youth representation, which we're still fighting for 16 and 17-year-olds to have the right to vote. And it might surprise you to know that Belgium was one of the last countries to grant EU citizens the right to vote in 2000. A case had to be brought before the European Court of Justice in order for Belgium to comply. And this was after 25 years of campaigning. Eventually, then it was opened in 2006 for non-EU citizens. So I think when you know how many people have fought for your voting rights, it makes you think about who's going to make this history in the future. And so I don't know if any of you know this man. This man, Roger Knowles, was the mayor of Schaerbeek in the 1980s. And what you see here is the mayor on a camel, because he wanted to do this of one of his many publicity stunts to say, this is what's going to happen to Schaerbeek if we give immigrants the right to vote here. And I share this with you because Brussels was a very different place when these voting rights were first discussed and these procedures were created. You had a lot of racism and white flight in reaction to EU citizens coming here and people coming from the rest of the world. In fact, up until the mid-1990s, 8 Brussels communes had the right to stop registering foreign citizens from living in their commune if they felt like there were too many of them concentrated together, creating social problems. So luckily, this is not the Brussels that all of us know, the welcoming Brussels, but who is going to be making the history of the city in the future? Will you be making the history of the city in the future? And I share with you one story of change where internationals were key to the transformation. In the 1960s, you see on the left, the Grand Place, which was the most beautiful square of Europe and also a parking lot. And it was in 1971 that the Bulletin, which was the international community's English-speaking magazine, ran a campaign inspired by UNESCO to have a sit-in in the Grand Place to ask for the cars to be permanently removed. And it was thanks to their mobilization as the international community that Brussels residents got back the Grand Place. And that inspired Brussels philosopher Philip van Parijs in 2012 to organize a picnic on the Boulevard Ansbach, which you know was full of cars, to say that actually we would like to take back the public space. And that led the city and the region to create the pedestrian area that we can all now know and love on Ansbach. So we need to know our history. Second thing is we need to know our numbers, because there is power in numbers. Here you see that in 2018, international voters would have made up 1/3 of the electorate across the Brussels communes if they had signed up to vote. And as you can see, in some communes, they would have made up nearly half of the voters in Saint-Gilles, in Etterbeek, in Ixelles. And that's a lot of power. So again, I showed you this is how many votes you would need in Ixelles if internationals didn't vote. But if they actually did vote, what you can see here is that now parties would need to probably get twice as many votes in order to get those final seats. So they would really, politicians have to be really so much more responsive to the entire electorate if everyone was included. And so I give this as a fun way of getting people to engage with their commune. I asked you what commune you come from here. I just chose one of our communes. So, you know, my first question is, I don't know if any of you recognize who this person is, but this is the mayor of Ixelles, who was elected in 2018. And I wonder, how many votes do you think he got in 2018, right? You saw that there are around 35,000 Belgian citizen voters in Ixelles. So how many votes did you think the mayor got? Well, He got 2,233 votes. Now, what percent of internationals were signed up to vote in Excel in 2018? It was only 17%. But if they had all signed up to vote, what percent of the vote would they have had? Well, as I said, they would have had nearly half of the votes, which is 31,000 votes. So in this little exercise, I'm asking you, who actually has the power here? And it's us. These statistics are very powerful for ordinary voters. And it's really important in these upcoming elections because the 2024 elections are going to be very close. We could have major changes happen in your commune. This is data across the region asking people who they might vote for in the 2024 elections in general. And so you can see quite a range of parties that could be represented in your commune. And I just show you from Wikipedia how these are evolving as we get more and more polls. And what you can see is this is very tight. We have a lot of ups and downs that are happening from now, certainly until October. So there is a lot of choices that we have. The elections are going to be very close. And for you to know what your priorities are, that's our third way that we're going to change the city, is by having our priorities. There's going to be an electoral test from the RTBF, the main Francophone news outlet, that will allow you to get to know what the general electoral issues are going to be in Brussels. So they have one for the regional level, but you'll see the questions, and a lot of them are also applicable at the local level. So, and then in the end, I just answered no on everything. So this doesn't reflect necessarily, any political beliefs. It just shows you that it's a good way for people to share what their priorities are, and in a nonpartisan way, they get information about what the parties are that they can then start to go and explore. And what's great about this tool is it gives you a lot of information about where all of the parties stand on an issue, and then the answer provided that by their party. So for example, last time parties were asked, do you think that foreign residents in Brussels should be automatically registered to vote in the local elections? And so you can see how the parties answered. Or you also see another question, do you think that all application forms in Brussels should also be available in English? So it's really a great tool for newcomers to Belgian politics to see where parties stand. And my last advice on how we actually can make this work is to really work together with our EU candidates who are running from all political parties. I was amazed in 2018 to see 300 EU citizens running, and actually 25 of them got elected across the political spectrum, all types of parties. And this is actually a pretty good outcome, to be honest. But we can show that the internationals of Brussels are really contributing also with their leadership, with their ideas, with their expertise, with their time. And by working together, I think we can try and reach this 1/3 of the population. So just lastly, what? All right. Now I know why and how I can sign up to vote. What can I do to sign up to vote and join Brussels international community? Well, for that, you need to make sure that all of your friends get some key information and some key inspiration. So nearly all EU adults can sign up to vote, and non-EU citizens can if they've been here for 5 years. So you just have to be age 18 on election day. You have to be registered as a resident in your commune, or you might have the special ID card if you work for the EU institutions. But you have to submit your form by the 31st of July, 3 months before the election. Now, to do that, you can get the information, as I said, at this link. You can find the portal online if you want to sign up directly, if you have the Belgian electric card reader, or if you have It's Me, you can go and do it. And as I said, I'd love someone to try and do this now. If you don't have either of those options and your EU country also has an electronic card reader, you can try through that system as well. Now, if you don't want to do it online, there is a form that you can download. You can print out the first 2 pages, make that double-sided, so it's just 1 page for people. There's one form for EU citizens, there's one form for non-EU citizens, and people just have to fill in this extremely basic information. You see, name, birth date, address, nationality, the national number, and then they have to say where they signed it, the date, and they have to give the signature. And then they can either mail this or they can drop it off with their commune. So here you have all the addresses of the commune, or again, people can just walk by the commune, drop it off, no appointments, no extra documents required, no waiting in queues. If people are going to send it in by mail, what you can do on the envelope is write loi électorale above the address of the commune, and then that means that people don't actually have to put a postage stamp on at all because it's a loi électorale. You can include a photocopy of your ID. That's recommended, but it's not required. And also I recommend signing the back of the flap of the envelope when you've put it in there, and put your return address, because this really shows that you've done this individually. And if you are already registered, but you're worried, you want to confirm this, you can check on your iris box, actually. You can go in, get your commune information, and you can see that you are a voter. So there is a lot of official FAQs that are out there in French or in Dutch. This is the one for the Brussels region in French and Dutch. And as Bryn said, the Brussels Commissioner will be making a detailed one available in English. This is my FAQ, so this is how I answer questions for people. So again, when people say, how do I sign up? I say, well, online, mail, or drop off the form by the 31st of July. Signing up to vote is the easiest thing you'll do in Belgium. There's no documents, no appointments, no waiting time. Well, what if I've signed up? What if I sign up later, or I only get registered as a resident later? Well, sorry, but next time you'll be signed up for the next communal elections. I signed up for the EU elections. Is this the same thing? No, it's not, because the local and the EU elections are different. It's really your choice. I voted already in the local elections. Do I need to re-register? No, you don't. And even if you move communes, it moves with you. Am I obliged to vote forever in Belgium? No, it's kind of an opt-in, opt-out system. Like, you can deregister as an international voter by just sending a simple letter to your commune, and you're automatically deregistered if you move abroad. I don't know if I'm going to be here on election day. Well, no problem. You can just give a vote by proxy form to another voter. Some people say to me, oh, I can't vote in Belgium because it'll affect my job here, or my taxes, or my legal status, or I'll lose the right to vote in my home country. No, 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 no. No country or institution requires this. And plus, in Belgium, the voter lists are secret. They're not shared with anybody. And then lastly, people again hear, oh, voting is obligatory. Am I going to be sanctioned, or am I going to be fined? The way I answer is to say, no. I mean, obligatory voting is symbolically important to make sure that all voters are treated equally and are represented. But Belgium is pretty flexible in practice. So really, you should use your proxy vote if you're going to be abroad or unavailable on a voting day. And you can also go to the poll and vote blank if you really don't want to vote. But only no-show poll workers are sanctioned. That means that if you've been called to be a poll worker, that's usually Belgian citizens who are working already in the public sector or in law. If you are called to do that essential role and you don't show up, yeah, well, then you'll probably be sanctioned. But individual non-voters, well, first of all, they cannot be denounced or targeted in any individual way. It would be objective, 40, 80 euro fine for all first-time non-voters in theory, but no one has been fined since 2003. And if you Google the news from all the major Belgian news stories, they'll tell you the truth that, yeah, no one's been fined since 2003. 17% of Brussels voters abstain, which is 100,000 people. And in fact, it's no longer obligatory to vote in Flanders in the 2024 local elections. So that's my kind of key FAQ. For the vote by proxy form, it's always good to hand that out and to explain to people how they can do the proxy. And when people want to know what's next, you can tell them that the test electoral is coming out in April. The campaign will begin over the summer. We'll have the other elections on the 9th of June. And maybe by the summer, we'll have the regional governments formed and we'll have the local programs and the lists published. But you gotta, by the 31st of July, sign up. And then you're going to receive a acknowledgement of receipt of your application. You're going to receive a confirmation letter, either by post or online, and you can check your status on Iris Box. And then 15 days before the election, you're going to get your voter convocation and come on the 13th of October for election day, where the process is amazing. It's so quickly done, and it's meaningful to have everyone in your neighborhood coming together for, what also feels like a big moment of community. So I want to just end with one last set of points, which is inspiring people is just as important as informing them. So it's important to talk to people about the history of voting rights, dispelling myths, talking to them about their local power, talking to them about what the issues are going to be in this campaign and what the powers are of their communes. I mean, I even came up with a funny way of talking to people to say, well, what, we're all Bruxellois. What kind of Bruxellois are you? I'd ask them, did you come here for work or for family or for Europe? How long have you been here? And based on that, with some volunteers, we came up with different ways of talking to people. So I kind of right now am the Lion of Waterloo. I'm here with my family, raising them, and but others of you might have just been here for a few years and you're still running around the world with your work. Well, you're just like Tintin, or you came here for the institutions. Well, you're a Schumanican piss. Like, really help people feel that they are an equal part of this city. And to do that, just like one last little tip, it is important how we talk about this process. So I always talk about international voters, that they are 1/3 of Brussels, and I really give people the information on their commune. I make sure that we do this person to person. You need to talk about why you want to vote, why Brussels needs us to vote, why you care. I tell people to sign up and that it's so easy, that they can do it online in all of these different ways, that there are no risks, no problems, no sanctions, and there's always a solution here. And then the last thing is ask people with a hard ask, can I count on you to join the international community and to vote? And recognize them. If they have voted already, thank them for leading the way, but tell them their vote's not really going to count if they can't get their friends and their family to also take the form and join them. And make sure that when people have said they're going to sign up to vote, thank them for being a voter. So I have my 2-minute script that I'm still working on of how I would say this if I was knocking on someone's door and have this conversation. I'm going to continue to work on this. Others will as well, and we're going to share this as resources. But I hope that with this training, you get a much better idea of why, how, and what exactly you can do to make Brussels the most cosmopolitan democracy in the world. Thanks, everybody.
Absolutely wonderful, Thomas. That was super interesting. A bit of data, a bit of inspiration, a bit of instruction, and even a history lesson folded into it. Really good. Thank you so much for coming and sharing.